I never thought I'd be scared of a video game. I mean, come on. It's Sonic the Hedgehog, the blue blur, the childhood icon that defined Saturday mornings for millions of kids like me. But what I found last month changed everything I thought I knew about that smiling blue mascot. I found something inside the game, something that shouldn't exist. And I swear, even now when I close my eyes, I can still hear the music slowing down, like it's calling me back. It started at a flea market on the edge of town. You know, the kind half-empty stalls, the smell of rust and rain, people selling old VHS tapes, cracked PlayStation cases, and boxes of tangled cables that no one could possibly use anymore. I wasn't looking for anything special. I just liked nostalgia, retro consoles, old games, that kind of thing. Then I saw it. A small cardboard box filled with Sega Genesis cartridges. No labels, just black plastic, dusty and worn. One of them caught my eye because it had a piece of tape across the front, and written on it in shaky red marker was a single word: Sonic. I picked it up and turned it over. No sticker, no official Sega logo. Just a hand-carved Sega scratched into the back with what looked like a pocket knife. The guy running the booth was an older man, gray beard, missing a few teeth, eyes that didn't quite focus when he talked. "How much for this one?" I asked, trying to sound casual. He looked up, squinted, and said, "That one's not supposed to be there." He reached for it like he wanted to take it away, but then hesitated. "You want it that bad, kid?" I wasn't a kid. I was 24, but I nodded anyway. He stared at me for a long second, then said, $5, but don't play it at night." I thought he was joking. I even laughed a little, but his face didn't move. He just stared. I paid, shoved the cartridge in my backpack, and left before he could say anything else. That night I got home around 11. I still had my old Sega Genesis from when I was a kid, so I dusted it off, hooked it up to the TV, and slid the cartridge in. It clicked, a little too tightly, like the pins didn't quite fit. I turned on the power. The usual Sega logo appeared, but there was no sound, just silence. Then the screen went black for a few seconds before flickering back on. The title screen appeared, but something was wrong. Sonic was there, smiling like always, but the background wasn't the bright blue sky I remembered. It was dark, almost black, with faint red lines moving like veins. Sonic's eyes seemed off. They weren't the usual big cartoon ovals. They looked more realistic. Human, even. I pressed start. The character select screen came up, but only Tails was available. I figured maybe it was just a weird hack. People made mods and ROM edits all the time, right? The first level loaded, but instead of Green Hill Zone, it was something else. The ground was cracked brownish gray, with broken trees in the background. The music was distorted, like the normal theme slowed down and played through a fan. I started running, but Tails didn't smile like he used to. His animation was different. He kept looking over his shoulder. Every few seconds, he'd stop, look directly at the camera, and his tail would twitch. I laughed nervously, probably some edgy fan hack. Then I saw something move in the background, a blue blur, just for a second. Sonic? But I was playing as Tails. The blur disappeared behind a hill. I tried to follow it, but every time I moved forward, the background would flicker, and Tails would slow down like he was trudging through mud. Then the screen froze. The sound stopped. And for a full 10 seconds, nothing happened. When the image returned, Tails was standing in front of what looked like a wall of static. In the middle was Sonic, but not the Sonic I knew. He was facing the camera, his eyes now completely black except for two small red dots pulsing like embers. The game didn't let me move. Tails just stood there shivering. Then text appeared at the bottom of the screen. "Do you want to play with me?" My thumb hesitated over the controller. There was no yes or no option, but after a few seconds, the game continued on its own. The next level was different. Everything was dark, and the background looked like a twisted version of Marble Zone. Lava, but colder, darker. The music was a reversed melody of the main theme, and beneath it, faint whispers. Real whispers. I leaned thinking maybe it was just the TV's static, but I could make out faint words, something like "don't look" and "behind you." I froze. I was alone in my apartment, but when I looked up, I swore I saw a shadow move in the corner of my room, just a flicker. The kind of thing you tell yourself you imagined. When I looked back, Tails was crying. His eyes were pixelated red dots. The level glitched again, and for a split second I saw something in the static, something like a human face. Then the game reset itself. No title screen this time. Just black. Then text appeared again. "You can't stop him." I yanked the cartridge out, heart pounding. The screen stayed black for a few seconds before the TV turned to static. I tried changing the input, turning it off and on again. But the static didn't stop. Then, through the static, I heard it. That laugh. You know the sound Sonic makes when you idle too long and he taps his foot impatiently? It was that, but slower, deeper, distorted, like something breathing through it. That was the moment I unplugged everything. I didn't touch the game again for a week, but something changed in my apartment after that night. My console would turn on by itself. My TV would flicker to static at random. My phone would buzz, and when I'd check it, the screen would be filled with lines of code, random characters always ending in XE. At first I thought it was a coincidence. Maybe my power outlets were faulty. Maybe my TV was dying. Then 3 nights later I woke up to the Sega startup jingle, except I hadn't turned on the console. The screen was on. The cartridge was still out, and yet Sonic was there. His face filled the entire screen. He wasn't smiling anymore. He was staring right at me, and the whispering was back. Louder now. This time it wasn't coming from the TV. It was behind me. I didn't look. I couldn't. I ran to the wall and unplugged the entire power strip. The screen stayed on for a few seconds before finally going black. That should have been the end of it. But a few days later, when I checked my computer, I noticed a new file on my desktop. A single .txt file named Sonic Secret. I opened it. Inside there was only one line. "You played. Now I play." My computer crashed right after that. When I rebooted, every file, every photo, every document was gone, replaced with that same message. Over and over. I threw the cartridge out the next morning. I didn't sell it. I didn't trade it. I walked to the dumpster behind my apartment complex and threw it into the trash. But here's the thing. Last night I heard the startup chime again. The TV was off, the console was gone. I had packed it away in a box in the closet. But I still heard it. The faint, slow jingle, followed by that laugh. And when I turned to my monitor, there was a single message glowing in red text on the black screen. "You can't throw me away." The power went out right after that. The only light left was the red LED from my console box in the corner, blinking, on and off. I haven't opened it since. But sometimes at night I swear I can hear the sound of footsteps, running, circling my room, faster and faster, and every now and then a voice whispering in the dark, "Let's play again." I never believed in cursed games. Not really. I thought all those stories online like Sonic XE, Polybius, Lavender Town were just creepypasta fan fiction written by bored teenagers trying to freak each other out. But what happened to me wasn't fiction. It started with an update. I'd been playing Sonic Frontiers obsessively since it came out. It was everything I'd wanted. Open world exploration, fast movement, beautiful music, that sense of nostalgia from being a kid again. But one night Steam pushed an automatic update. No patch notes. No announcement. Just a download complete message. At first I didn't think much of it. Developers push small fixes all the time. But when I loaded the game, I noticed something immediately off. The main menu background, usually the bright, peaceful island view, was gone. In its place was a dark, fog-covered ocean. The horizon glowed faintly red, and under Continues a new option appeared. Explore hidden data. I thought it was a mod or a secret mode. Curiosity got the better of me. I clicked it. The screen went black for several seconds. Then text appeared. "Welcome back, player 01, you found it." I frowned. I'd never seen the game refer to me like that before. It wasn't my Steam username. The screen flickered and then I was in the game world, but it wasn't the one I remembered. The island looked abandoned. The grass textures were glitching, flashing between green and gray. There was no background music, only the wind. The sky was overcast, heavy with static clouds that didn't move naturally, they just warped. I moved Sonic forward. His animation seemed slower, almost hesitant. When I stopped moving, he looked directly at the camera instead of idling. That was the first thing that made my stomach twist. Usually, Sonic does his trademark impatient foot tap, but now he just stared at me. No blinking, just blank eyes. I laughed nervously and told myself it was a glitch. I even recorded it on OBS. Part of me thought this might be some kind of hidden RG Easter egg. Then I noticed something else. In the bottom left corner, next to the health ring counter, there was a small white number that hadn't been there before. 17. It wasn't part of the usual HUD. I figured maybe I was supposed to collect something. So I started exploring. The map was empty. No enemies, no objectives, no waypoints. Just gray land and broken ruins. Every few seconds, the environment would flicker between day and night like the world couldn't decide what time it was. Then, out of nowhere, I heard it. A faint sound behind the ambient wind. A distorted voice whispering through static. It sounded like Sonic's voice actor, but twisted, slowed down. It said something like, "Too fast, too deep." The whisper cut out abruptly, replaced by silence. I kept running forward, trying to find the first thing to collect, assuming this was some weird hidden challenge. Eventually, I saw something glinting near a cliffside. It was a golden ring, but instead of hovering, it was lying flat on the ground like it had fallen. When I picked it up, the counter in the corner changed to 27. The moment I did, the sound returned, a faint heartbeat, slow. It grew louder with every step I took. By the time I found the third ring, the environment had changed completely. The grass was gone, replaced by ash and black sand. The sky was red now, and Sonic's quills had a darker tint, almost black. I could feel my hands getting clammy on the controller. Something about it didn't feel like a mod. It didn't feel like any developer Easter egg I'd ever seen. The tone, the pacing, the atmosphere, it all felt intentional, like someone had made this just for me. After collecting the fifth ring, the game froze. Then the camera panned slowly toward Sonic's face. He wasn't smiling anymore. His pupils were gone, just blank white eyes. The screen zoomed closer until I could only see his face. Then it cut to black. When the image returned, I wasn't controlling Sonic anymore. The character on screen was me, or more accurately, my Steam avatar. A low-resolution model wearing the same jacket I always used in my profile picture. It was standing in the same ruined world, trembling slightly. Text appeared. Run. Before I could even react, something blurred across the screen, a blue streak tearing through the air at impossible speed. My character turned and started sprinting automatically, while that distorted heartbeat sound grew louder. The world around me glitched violently, fragments of terrain rising and collapsing. The blue blur followed faster and faster, occasionally slowing enough for me to see it clearly. It was Sonic, but not the normal one. His body was flickering, half glitched, his mouth stretched too wide, his limbs twitching. His eyes weren't glowing red like in Sonic 3Xe, they were empty. Hollow sockets that pulsed faint static. Every time he appeared, my camera would distort, zooming in too close, as if the game wanted me to see his face. Eventually, I reached the edge of a cliff. My character stopped. The heartbeat stopped too. Sonic appeared behind me, completely still. The camera shifted until his face filled the entire screen again. Then text appeared. "You went too far." The screen went black. I waited, expecting to respawn, but nothing happened. Then, without warning, the lights in my room flickered, just once. My monitor went black, then my entire PC rebooted. When it came back on, Steam automatically opened, but my library was empty. Every game was gone except one, Sonic Frontiers Hidden X. My stomach dropped. I tried to uninstall it, but Windows threw an error. This file is in use. Even when I shut everything down, the fan in my PC kept spinning, and the monitor stayed dimly lit, as if something was still running in the background. I left it overnight. The next morning, when I booted up again, my desktop wallpaper had changed. It was a still frame from the game. Sonic's face, half in shadow, half in light, and in the bottom right corner, faintly, someone had typed, "You didn't finish collecting the rings." At this point, I was done. I deleted everything, Steam, save data, the entire game folder. I even used a cleaner app to wipe residual files, but that didn't help. Every few days, my PC would turn on by itself. The desktop background would reset to that same image. Once the screen started glitching in real time, the wallpaper moving, Sonic's eyes tracking my cursor wherever I moved it. Then I started hearing it again. The heartbeat, but not through the speakers. Through the wall, a rhythmic, pulsing thump that followed me from my desk to my bed. That night I recorded it with my phone just to prove to myself it was real. But when I played the recording back, it wasn't the heartbeat anymore, it was a voice. Slow, garbled, but clear enough. It said, "One more ring." The next morning, I checked my Steam account again. My entire library had returned. All the games were back, except Sonic Frontiers, that one was gone. In its place was a single notification. New content added to your account. Hidden Levels DLC. When I hovered over it, my cursor froze. Then my screen flashed white for a split second before the game booted up automatically. No launcher, no Steam overlay, just straight into gameplay. This time it wasn't an open-world map. It was a hallway, dark concrete walls stretching endlessly. Sonic was standing at the far end, completely still. I couldn't move, couldn't quit, couldn't Alt-Tab. Then the screen started to dim, frame by frame, until all I could see was his silhouette. And a whisper. Run again. The lights in my room went out right then. My monitor shut off. Everything went silent except for the faint, impossible sound of footsteps on tile, not from the speakers, from behind me. I sat frozen, too scared to turn around. When I finally did, nothing was there, just my dark room, my reflection on the black monitor screen. But my reflection didn't move right. Its eyes stayed fixed on me, even as I turned my head. And on the bottom of the screen, faintly, were the words, "When I unplugged the PC, haven't turned it on since." But every few nights, the power light on the tower blinks on its own, one slow pulse at a time, like a heartbeat. I don't know what happens if it reaches 7, and I'm never going to find out. I've been a programmer for over 10 years, and I've seen some strange things buried in old code. Abandoned dev notes, creepy Easter eggs, corrupted assets that look like faces when you zoom in too close. But nothing ever truly disturbed me until the night I found the archive. It started with a freelance job. A guy reached out to me through an old forum for retro game restoration. He said he'd found a collection of Sega development builds from the 90s. Beta ROMs, prototypes, unreleased materials, that kind of thing, and wanted me to help clean and recompile them into playable form. His name was listed only as C. He offered to pay in Bitcoin, sent a massive zip file link, and told me not to share the contents with anyone. The folder was titled Sonic Archive 9299. At first, I thought it was just fan hoax stuff, but when I unpacked it, I found original Sega directories, real ones, full of test builds and early prototypes that had never been seen publicly. Some had handwritten dev comments in Japanese. Others had bizarre date stamps that didn't make sense. One file was tagged 10199.000, even though that timestamp format didn't exist in those old systems. Most of the builds didn't run, but one did. It was called Sonic Internal Test Bin. When I loaded it into my emulator, I expected maybe an early version of Green Hill Zone. Instead, the screen flickered for a second, and then displayed a title I'd never seen before. Sonic.Experimental Zone. The background wasn't cheerful. It was a simple black void with faint horizontal lines like the static hum of a CRT television. The Sega logo never appeared. Then, in a small white font, the words "For internal use only, do not distribute" flashed briefly at the top of the screen before fading out. I sat there staring. If this was real, I was sitting on something from Sega's internal testing branch, something that had never made it to the public. I pressed Start. The game loaded a simple map, or what I thought was a map. It wasn't any known Sonic level. The background was flat gray, the ground pattern looping endlessly. There were no rings, no enemies. Just Sonic standing completely still in the middle of the screen. When I pressed right, he didn't move. When I pressed jump, he didn't react. The only thing that happened was the faintest flicker, like the sprite was breathing. Then text appeared. No sound, no fanfare. Just a single line on the top of the screen. He's awake. At first, I assumed it was some debug message left by the developers. Maybe a joke. But then my emulator froze for a second. My CPU spiked. The fan's word. And then another message appeared, this time in red text. Where did you find this? I stared at it, confused. That wasn't an error. It was part of the game. I typed on my keyboard instinctively. It wasn't even a text input. But I found myself muttering. It was in the archive. The moment I said that out loud, the screen flashed white. When it returned, Sonic was gone. The background was still gray, but now there were faint, human-like footprints on the ground leading off-screen to the right. A sound began playing. Faint at first, then growing louder. A reversed version of the classic Green Hill Zone theme, echoing like it was coming from another room. I checked my speakers thinking maybe it was a glitch, but the sound wasn't coming from my computer. It was coming from my hallway. I froze. It was nearly 2 a.m. The apartment was silent except for that faint, warped melody playing somewhere near my door. I paused the emulator and listened. The music stopped instantly. I waited. Nothing. When I hit resume, Sonic was back on screen. But something about him had changed. His sprite looked slightly different. The eyes were darker. The grin stretched a little too far. Then new text appeared. You shouldn't have paused. That was when I shut it off. I told myself it was just a modded ROM. Maybe some fan edit uploaded to scare people like me. But when I went to delete the file, I noticed something else in the folder. A new subfolder had appeared, one I definitely hadn't seen before. It was called Watching. Inside were dozens of small image files, black and white screenshots, each one a frame of gameplay. But they weren't of Sonic, they were of me sitting at my desk, eyes fixed on the screen. Somehow the game had accessed my webcam. I hadn't even turned it on. Panicking, I unplugged my camera, my mic, and my Ethernet cable. Then I deleted the entire folder. But when I refreshed the directory, another file appeared automatically. A text document called Return Bin. When I opened it, there were no words, just random ASCII characters scrolling endlessly. Except near the middle of the file, hidden among the symbols, I found one readable line. You can't delete what's inside. That's when my monitor blinked. For half a second, the desktop disappeared, replaced by an image of Sonic's face, but not pixelated, photorealistic. His blue fur matted, eyes completely white, mouth stretched too wide to be human. Then the screen went black again. I left the room for a while just to breathe. When I came back, my computer was off, or so I thought. The power light was still blinking faintly. I pressed the button and the screen lit up again. The emulator had relaunched itself. This time, the game skipped the title screen and went straight to a dark corridor. Sonic was running automatically, faster and faster through a tunnel that seemed to stretch infinitely. The background was flickering between black and red, and every few seconds a distorted voice whispered through the speakers. It wasn't English, but it sounded like pleading, like someone whispering, "Please stop." After about a minute of this, the tunnel ended abruptly, and Sonic came to a halt in front of a single door. Written above it in dripping white text were the words, "Open the archive." The game froze again. My mouse stopped working. Then the message appeared on my real desktop screen, superimposed over everything else. "Open the archive." I reached for the power switch, but before I could shut it down, the door in the game creaked open. Sonic stepped inside. The screen cut to static. Then a video began playing. It was grainy, low quality, like an old VHS recording. The timestamp read 02/14/1997, and the setting looked like a Sega office or some kind of development lab. There were 3 people sitting at computers testing something on monitors. One of them said faintly, "We shouldn't have built this level." Then one of the men looked directly at the camera. His mouth moved, but no sound came through. The footage glitched, the colors bled into red, and then the screen went dark. When the image returned, Sonic was back, standing in front of the same door, but now the floor beneath him was covered in what looked like digital static spreading outward. The file explorer on my desktop was opening and closing on its own, cycling through folders, accessing drives that didn't even exist. I yanked the power cord from the wall. The screen went black instantly. I didn't touch my computer for 3 days. When I finally turned it back on, the hard drive had wiped itself. No files, no programs. Just one empty folder sitting in the root directory. It was called Sonic Internal. Inside was a single .mp4 file. It was titled Hello Again. I don't know why I clicked it. I wish I hadn't. The video started as a simple gameplay clip. Sonic standing in an empty world, the camera slowly zooming in. Then, without warning, the perspective shifted. The camera turned toward me. Not the in-game camera, my real webcam feed. My own face filled the screen, eyes wide, mouth slightly open. I scrambled to cover the lens, but the video kept playing, looping the same few seconds over and over until the audio finally cut out. Then the message appeared again, this time burned into the video itself. You are the final test. I destroyed the hard drive the next morning, physically. But even now, when I close my laptop or turn off my monitor sometimes, for just a fraction of a second before the screen goes black, I see something flicker in the reflection, a faint, smiling blue shape and a voice, just on the edge of hearing, whispering, I'm still in the code.